can you capture the essence of multiple different genres using simply an animation of a droplet? I believe so, and that's exactly what I'm gonna do in this video. Action makes me think speed, roughness, and impact. So I'm gonna go with a blob of water falling from an extreme height into some other vague body of water. The background doesn't matter here because I can get the action feeling from the movements and effects. I wanted a close-up on the droplet as it falls with the camera locked in. So the first thing I did was animate a loop of the droplet jiggling around. For now it's just outlined so I can get the movement to look good before I commit to color and details. Now, since there's no background aside from some blue, we need a way to show that it's falling. Some classic speed lines will do. I made this really thin oval with a white opacity gradient and used that for every line. Just resizing for variation. Then I made a 12-frame loop of these sort of randomized groups rapidly moving up. The falling action looked right, so I went back to the droplet and added in-betweens to smoothen it out. For coloring, I put in a medium to dark blue base, added white highlights on top, and some dark patches in the middle. I also added a small pale blue highlight to the bottom. Just before it hits, I have the body of water rise up for a few frames while the droplet elongates. Now the splash. Essentially, I'm doing a simpler version of what I did in this video. A crown shape rises up, bits break off while the rest falls down, and the droplets make mini droplets. Once I had the basics down on the splash, I went ahead on an impact frame. Not normally something you'd incorporate into a droplet hitting water, but we're making an action film here. So I ended up doing 3 frames with a black background and scratchy white lines moving outwards. To enhance the impact even more, I added a camera shake. Now some highlights and darker patches on the water. Of course, one crucial element is the ripple. As I always do, I used a pink circle as a guide, then drew white disintegrating lines on top of it. Using low opacity on that and a low opacity black shadow underneath gives it a bit more depth, with highlights as a nice touch. The last key ingredient is a secondary droplet that rises up when the first splash falls down. So that worked out quite well, I'd say. For a droplet of water splashing down, you certainly feel the intenseness. Well, I do. Yeah, I think that's a pretty actiony water drop. Can't complain. I mean, the specifics of, like, the shaping and details and colors, could have been more honed in on, just to make it more realistic or, nice to look at. But I'm not gunning for a masterpiece here. Let's move on to the next genre. For horror, my brain went the direction of dripping blood. Maybe that's obvious, but I decided on a dark room with only a wooden floor and a puddle of blood visible. It took a few attempts to get a shape I was happy with, but I got something workable. The drop is going to come off screen, adding to the mysterious and creepy nature of the scene. So it's basically going to drop into this puddle of blood which won't grow or splatter so it can loop. Perhaps the growing and splattering was a better idea, but I love an infinite loop. Now, the splash itself I animated kinda like regular water. It should really be more viscous, but if you're going for a cartoony violence look, I think this would suffice. Not much else to say about this one. I added the darks and highlights, then made ripples similar to last time. I also polished up the puddle and made the blood seep into the floor cracks. So that's my take on a horror droplet. Like I said before, probably should have been more viscous. Blood is thicker than water. Yeah, it looks pretty watery at the moment. So if I did this again, less tall of a splash, less easily broken apart. But I do think it looks kinda cool, with the intentional slowing down at the top of the splash, then speeding up. The atmosphere is definitely a horror vibe. Very dark visually and thematically. Well, next genre. Comedy comes from the unexpected. Of course, since I'm about to explain everything I'm doing, the final animation you see won't be very unexpected at all. Nevertheless, my idea is to start with something that looks like a water droplet forming, but when it hits the ground it just splats into a pile of goo. So for the formation, I start with a small ball that grows while the tail stretches out behind it. Eventually it snaps and falls to the ground, leaving a few tiny droplets behind. I made the fall quite fast and the stretch pretty extreme because that just seems funnier to me. Now to draw a splat shape. I worked on the drop forming a bit more, slowing down towards the end. I figured the splat could also do with some additional disconnected bits. For colouring, I obviously went blue to give the appearance of water, and a yellow background with some light yellow floor. I think yellow and blue look kinda comedic, or is it just Swedish? Anyway, the last step is adding the dark tones and highlights. Doesn't add to the comedy value, but it does make it look better. Alright, as far as a droplet goes, I think that's pretty funny. Really quite simple, but sometimes simple is just what you need. Literally something splatting onto the ground. Well, I hope you got some joy out of that. I'm gonna move on to genre number 4. Drama can mean a lot of different things, but I'm gonna go with the pensive and sad vibe for this one. I thought the perfect thing for that was a droplet trickling down a window covered in rain mist. As you can see, I'm starting with a background in Photoshop. Quite grey and dreary to fit the dramatic theme. I put a light layer of airy, white, opaque brush strokes on top of the glass that I'll be able to mask out for the droplets and trickles. With the background done, I put it into Adobe Animate in 3 separate layers, then made a mask. I erased parts of the mask where I wanted the trickles and droplets to go. These were all going to stay still so I could focus on one particular droplet in the right third. Then I put a shadow and highlight on one part just to test how it would look. For the moving piece, I drew a yellow path and animated a green blob following it as a reference. Then erased parts of the mask frame by frame following that. Once that trickle down looked good, I moved on to highlights and shadows. Then I did the same for various static elements, and it was pretty much done. And that is my dramatic rendition of a drop of water. Is it deep? Not literally, it's quite a small amount of water. But metaphorically, maybe. You decide. I think I did what I set out to do with this one. It looks decent, would have been nice to have a bit of movement aside from that one main droplet, but I just wasn't willing to put that much time into it. Still, it means there's one very clear focus point. First attempt at this kind of misty window thing as well, so not too bad. And that's that. 4 genres of droplets animated to perfection. Not perfection. I think it went relatively well, but let me know what you think. Also, let me know if you want to see more genre videos, what kind of things you want me to do it with. Anyway, thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in another one. Goodbye.